Large areas of heavy rain continue to bring a flooding potential, and I'll have the latest on that spin in the Western Caribbean. Your forecast across the Caribbean and the Bahamas starts right now.
This is Meteo Mundo.
Okay, friends, Rusty back here at Meteo Mundo. Great to see you again on this Thursday afternoon. Hope things are going well. Coming up, we'll be monitoring some areas, big areas of rain, some of that leading to some flooding. We'll have the latest on what's happening in the Western Caribbean and how all of this is going to be impacting your weather for the week ahead. As we get started, thank you so much for liking the video. Of course, if you have a specific question about the forecast, feel free to drop it in the comment section below. And while you're there, let me know where you're viewing from and what the weather's been like. I always love to hear from our friends at Meteo Mundo. Let's get started. You're looking at our broad enhanced satellite imagery, the live lightning data on this Thursday afternoon. A couple of areas to note here. This is, of course, what's happening live with our enhanced satellite imagery. Also want to show you the water vapor imagery as well. Gives you a good idea of where we have those richer, deeper moisture plumes. We've had some heavy and flooding rains through portions of the Virgin Islands. That's beginning to get better, but a couple of other areas that I'll be monitoring here over the next day or so. And we have a little bit of drier air coming back into portions of the Windward Islands. We'll highlight that as well. But let's get started with the active weather on this Thursday afternoon. So I'm going to get you in right now to our friends in the Cayman Islands first. This is an area that's been desperate for the rain, but we've had some pretty nasty storms on this Thursday afternoon over Little Cayman and Cayman Brac. Generally speaking, Georgetown and Grand Cayman has been dry so far. These storms might try and push their way back off towards the west. They're almost kind of building. They're just expanding in size right now, but a lot of hefty lightning. And I tell you what, just off the coast of Cuba, these are some really nasty storms. They are also trying to drift a bit to the south, but again, in general, they're just kind of expanding in size, and this has allowed storms to now get into Jamaica. So again, Little Cayman, Cayman Brac, storms right now, Grand Cayman a possibility later this afternoon, and now some of this activity is getting into Jamaica. This is again, live look on this Thursday afternoon of what's happening for these storms. We've had some rain develop here and there. Nice little strokes of lightning here on the far eastern sides of the island from the Port Antonio area off towards the south and to the east, at least some passing showers over the Kingston area. But again, right now it's just a little bit more concentrated. It's not extremely widespread, but again, our friends in Jamaica, you guys are in this rich moisture plume, so the rain opportunity is not going anywhere over the next several days. Again, there will be some locally heavy downpours, which could lead to some isolated flash flooding. That is still a possibility, but again, flash flooding is so localized in general. At this point in time, I've seen no watches and warnings, but always keep an eye out to your local officials, the meteorological service there in Jamaica, if they issue additional flash flooding potential. But again, we're in that richer, deeper moisture here across the island. Little flare up of a couple lightning strikes there right in the heart of the island. You get the idea that, you know, again, with the heat of the day, we're developing these storms. That's really been the case as well. Some of this activity has been in the morning, but when we ramp up the heat of the afternoon here, we really lift that moisture into the atmosphere and can really drive in some of this nasty weather. Now, at this point in time, we're relatively dry in the Turks and the Caicos, but what has been the case the last several afternoons, these storms move off of Cuba and then move into places like Matthewtown and Cockburntown. It's relatively quiet right now in Hispaniola, but just over the last half hour, and I mean literally over the last half hour here, as we get into the mid and the late afternoon hours, starting to see a few storms develop. Again, I'm just going to pause this at the last frame here. And again, clusters of storms, Port-au-Prince, Bahamas, on over towards the east, isolated still, but this activity should blossom during the heat of the day, and widespread showers and storms are again likely across the island. Not everyone's going to get it, but again, heftier downpours will come along for the ride. The other interesting thing about this as well is when I throw on the feels like temperatures, again, what has been the case that we have been talking about? When it's not raining, it's really, really hot. Santiago de los Caballeros, 108-degree feels like temperature. That, of course, is in Fahrenheit. In Celsius, that's right around 43 degrees. It's rough. Puerto Plata 105, Santo Domingo 102, Port-au-Prince 105. As you would imagine, we've got ourselves a heat advisory in effect for Puerto Rico. Now, it's been a quieter day so far. Ponce feels like 100, San Juan in at 99, heat index and a heat advisory for St. Croix in at 102. Going to put this into motion. Our friends, especially in St. Thomas, St. John, and portions of the British Islands in yesterday's video, came in and talked about the flooding that occurred there. We had some very heavy storms late yesterday across St. Thomas, St. John, and portions of the British Virgin Islands. We're now thankfully seeing that move off towards the east and dissipate. Can't rule out additional storms redeveloping in a scattered fashion in this area, especially over Puerto Rico for today. But the surge of moisture is moving east, and it's actually beginning to diminish as well. Now, we've had a few storms as far north as Anguilla earlier in the day. You can see that over St. Martin, St. Bartholomew, Ceiba. Some downpours here. And again, when we throw on the heat index, you can clearly see it's a really hot day when you're not getting the storms. Look at St. Martin in at around 108 right now. We're going to try and get you a few showers, but there's also a decent dust layer over the Leeward Islands. And in general, you guys are drying out. So again, feels like numbers here right around or above 100 in many locations with a very dry forecast over the next several days. There is a tropical wave well off to our east. This will begin to impact the Leeward Islands on Monday, but between now and then, I don't expect there to be a lot of rain. Same thing for the ABC Islands, and it's an even drier forecast overall as well. Again, we'll put on the feels like temperatures. And what else is new? We're going to be pushing 110 in these areas. Please take precautions. Our friends in the ABC Islands, it's been extremely dry. And obviously that heat is nothing to play with in the afternoon hours for us here. On over towards Central America. Once again, all eyes on what's going to be happening here in this area with the opportunity, first of all, to get a broad spin, but also to surge in some tropical moisture, and that is the benefit. We need to get more rain. Now, at this point in time, there's not a lot on the board, but as we get deeper into the afternoon and early evening, do you see that little flare up right there? Let's zoom in on that real quickly. This is what I expect to happen. Right over San Ignacio and Bomopan, we're getting an isolated shower developing. It's going to be isolated, but again, more tropical moisture coming in to help this opportunity. And if you live in these areas in Belize, let me know if you catch one of these showers. The rain chance will continue to get better. But once again, is this going to be a slam dunk drought busting rain over the next few days? Probably not, but it's good to be talking about better rain chances. Look at Belize City, 114 for a feels like temperature. It's around 45 degrees Celsius. That's no fun, guys. I mean, this is dangerous. Simple as that. Our friends in the Bahamas right now, isolated storms ramping up on this Thursday afternoon. We'll bring in our live radar, throw that into motion. Hopefully it will click on. There we go. Let me take off the satellite data. A little too congested with both out there, but you get the idea. This has been the same scenario here for our friends in the Bahamas the last few days, especially Northwest Bahamas. Isolated storms. There's one right over Grand Bahama. We've had a few storms over the Abaco area. They've flared up. Call them pulse thunderstorms. They flare up pretty quickly. They've got some lightning. They dump some heavy rain in an isolated spot, and then they wind back down pretty quickly. Pulse storms, they don't last very long, maybe 15, 30 minutes at most. Additional storms right now over Andros. Again, an area where some of you have commented you need the rain. Well, guess what, guys? Over the last couple of frames here, and I'll pause this at the very end, we've had some decent storms almost across the entire island, especially down towards the southern tip. Right now, we're still dry in places like Nassau and Eleuthera, but I'll be monitoring that, and you can see some of that lightning that's offshore a little bit more as well. If I go back over to the broad perspective here and then zoom back in, I do want to highlight the rest of the islands. Again, storms are a little bit more widespread, central, southeast sides of the Bahamas. You guys are closer to that plume of moisture, but this is an area that could get very wet starting early next week, and we'll talk more about that coming up as well. Speaking of that, what do you say we get into it right now? So let me bring on our GFS model. We're going to look at the GFS, and I believe the name is going to cooperate today, so we'll look at the name. As I get these models into motion, again, if you haven't liked the video yet, do me a big favor, click that like button right now. I appreciate your support. If you've been looking for your latest forecasts across the Caribbean and the Bahamas, found your home here at Meteo Mundo. Thank you so much for clicking that like button right now. Okay, so let's get started here. We're going to go up actually and start with what's going on in Bermuda. Bermuda is going to see a relatively quiet 5 days. There's going to be some moisture off towards your south. You're going to get a fresh breeze out of the west with another storm system, but you're kind of in between right now. Surf and sea conditions overall aren't going to be that horrible for the island in general. And again, you're going to be dry, generally speaking, over the next 5 days because this moisture plume is going to miss you off towards the south, but it is going to be impacting places like the Turks of the Caicos and Jamaica and Hispaniola and areas off towards the west. So generally speaking, okay, from Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic and San Juan in Puerto Rico and on off towards the Leeward Islands, we start a drying trend starting tomorrow, all right? Not completely dry, especially in Hispaniola, but lower rain chances overall. And again, for my friends in the Leeward Islands, it's just an isolated shower chance with our easterlies over the next few days. I'm going to stop this at the very last day as we get into Monday. And here comes our next tropical wave. This is the next thing I'll be monitoring for you guys. But between now and then, only expect isolated showers in the afternoon with a very, very hot forecast. It's not even that wet for the ABC Islands, guys. It's going to be even drier. Again, Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao may not get a drop of rain over the next 5 days. I've got a 10% chance in for you guys, but generally speaking, not a lot of rain on the board. And again, what have we done? And I mentioned this in last week's videos. We are shifting our pattern. We're getting drier in the east, at least in the short term, and pushing this moisture off towards the west. I mean, obviously, these tropical waves coming through the Caribbean and their trajectories matter a lot when that happens. But now the areas that have not had as much rain start to get into the act. So let's break it down. For the Cayman Islands, for Jamaica, you stay in this wet, high moisture content area. Showers, isolated storms, blustery conditions will come along for the ride. Areas of heavy rain, localized flooding are a possibility here over the next 5 days. In general, I would expect there to be even a little bit more rich moisture later into the period here as we get towards the end of the weekend, especially from the Cayman Islands, even off towards the west. Jamaica may begin to dry out after that. But again, in these areas, we're going to get good opportunities for showers. Now, obviously, part of the story is, and we're going to get more into it, what's going to be happening here over Central America. GFS shows you this very broad twist. But again, regardless of a disturbance of a tropical nature, this is about getting that rich moisture back into the areas that really need the rain. And again, I'm going to show you several different models, but all of them are optimistic to throw in higher rain chances for places like Honduras and Guatemala and Belize and the Yucatan. It is kind of a building on a daily thing where the moisture gets more enhanced each day. So overall, rain chances will go up between now and the end of the weekend. And then the heavier rain potential goes up between now and the end of the weekend as, again, more moisture comes in. But again, it's just good to see that places like Belize City and Roatan and San Pedro Sula and even up towards Cozumel and Cancun are all going to have the opportunity for some of these showers, okay? Now, again, there's going to be some tropical moisture to play with here, and we can see some pretty nasty storms on the Pacific side of the Caribbean. The biggest question mark with the models that I'm going to show you coming up is what happens after about day 5 with this broad twist here near the Yucatan. The GFS is a little bit quicker and a little bit farther off towards the east. And this is why places like the Bahamas could start to get wet. Now, as we get into day 5 here, it's not there as of yet, but I'll show you that coming up. But before we get into the extended, let's go over to the NAM. Again, I like to show you guys a couple of different models and what I agree with and what I don't agree with this. Now, the NAM is a little bit sloppier in nature, okay? You're just gonna see more widespread rain on the NAM. It tends to be like that. It's not as concentrated as the GFS. The European model is a little bit more concentrated with some of this as well, but it just shows you the abundance of the tropical moisture that's going to be feeding into the central and eventually the northwest Caribbean. And again, it's a little bit more widespread over the Turks and Caicos. It's a little bit quicker to get some of this rain in over the Bahamas. But generally speaking, the farther north and west that you live here in the Caribbean and into the Bahamas, the wetter your area is going to get. And even our far eastern zones, don't worry too much. It's going to be a dry 4 or 5 days, but another tropical waves coming in. But rich, abundant moisture. And the NAM is even wetter in places like the Cayman Islands and Jamaica as far as the potential for some heavier rain. I mean, if there's a bit of a twist some of that could be spinning right over the open waters here of the Northwest Caribbean and keeping some of that heavier rain in the area. And just to show you again, for Central America, it's about the same scenario as the GFS, where the moisture builds in every day and rain chances just go higher and higher. Again, it's not a slam dunk that this is going to help the drought out, but guys, we got to get the first drop of rain before we're talking about ending the drought there in portions of Central America. So your rain chance over the next 3 days looks like this. Jamaica, high chance through at least Friday, maybe slightly lower on Saturday. The NAM would keep it wetter. The GFS would be a little bit drier, pushing the heaviest moisture west, but still, even on Saturday, it's a 60% chance. Especially the southeast Bahamas, rain chances going up with isolated showers and storms in the northwest Bahamas. Watch out for some rougher seas out there when these storms get going. And obviously, with the lightning threat, our boaters, our mariners want to be back in port when they get going. Turks and Caicos, going to get wet, guys. It's already been wet, but more storms on the way. The Dominican Republic, again, will start to see their rain chance tail off a bit. Cayman Islands, higher rain chances that we've been talking about for quite some time there for our friends in the Cayman Islands. Belize City, nice to be improving those rain chances, and they'll be at least 50% into Sunday and Monday as well. And again, Cancun and Cozumel, rain chances going up, and those could go higher early next week to go along with that. Puerto Rico, 60% chance for showers later today, so still going to be some pockets of heavier rain, and then you dry out and expect there to be heat advisories each afternoon for the National Weather Service and San Juan. U.S. and British Virgin Islands, again, we had some flooding rains there. Our thoughts are with our friends who had to deal with that late last night. Rain chances going down, and then for Anguilla and Dominica and Barbados, very isolated showers throughout the Leeward Islands, Trinidad and Tobago, and at that. And if the ABC Islands catch a shower, they're going to be very, very lucky. Okay, so now let's get into the extended of what's going to be happening here in the Northwest Caribbean. First thing I'm going to do is actually go back out to the satellite imagery here, because again, there's a couple of different things I can show you. Let's switch back over to our water vapor imagery. All right, there is just a very large, very not concentrated twist, okay? So there is a little bit of spin here, but it's not at the lowest levels of the atmosphere. But the biggest thing is how expansive that area is and all of the tropical moisture it's going to be throwing into the area. So I'll go back over to the GFS model. And give me 1 second to set that up. And again, if you haven't liked the video, I certainly appreciate that. But now we're going to be talking about how this could play out, and we'll look at the GFS and the European model, and then we'll look at the potential for the rainfall that's going to be coming along with it, because that really will be the big story. I mean, even if this thing tries to spin up into something at this point in time, I don't see it being anything significant, but it could be a huge shield of rain that'll be moving into the Northwest Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and potentially even the Western Atlantic. So here we go. This is the GFS model. Again, what we tend to see on this one is a little bit quicker motion and a little bit farther north and east compared to both the NAM and the European models. All right. But again, hefty rainfall in this area. And then as we get into early next week, we'll start to see that spin move into the southern Gulf of Mexico. And as we get about a week out here, guys, you can start to see where that heavy rain is going to set up. All right. And as a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is, because we can, and when it's important, I will, we'll go out 2 more days just to show you how this will then spread back over portions of the Bahamas. So with the GFS, we would be watching for some heftier rain there. And again, right at the end, I don't want to put too much credence into it here, you do get a little bit more activity right there in the central Gulf of Mexico, okay? So that's something to monitor, simple as that. Notice there's a fair amount of dry air, though, on the western side. What I'm more focused in on right now is the heavy rain it could bring to some of these areas, and then how far east some of that heavy rain spreads on the GFS. So since we're looking at the GFS, we'll go back over to the vorticity here. And again, this is spin in the atmosphere. All right, this is not at the lowest levels. I'm going to show you the wind at the surface. But again, what this allows me to see is what kind of spin do we have? How strong is it, and how widespread it is? Okay, I mean, is it just a little pinhole, or do we have a broad area? And when we're talking about getting a lot of moisture into play, you look at these broad spins, and that's exactly what we're seeing right over Central America. Now, one thing that could really try and limit this from really doing much is that it is trying to spin up right over some higher terrain in inland areas. But Again, this is the GFS right at the end. We don't want to weight this too much right now, but based on that latest model trend, you can see that spin right there in the central Gulf of Mexico. It is something to monitor. It's, what, about 9 days out from now, all right? So we'll see once it emerges into the south central Gulf of Mexico, what happens with that. It will be fighting some dry air off towards the west, but again, something to keep an eye on, but nothing more than that at this point in time, okay? Let's take a look at the winds, all right? Because you can have a decent amount of spin in the atmosphere, but if it doesn't translate down to the surface, it's going to lift and give you some heavy rain, but it's not going to turn anything tropical. So now let's look at our surface winds, and that's what these are. These are 10-meter winds, about 30 feet up in the atmosphere. Okay, purples, by the way, we start to get into that area where there's some decent wind. And by the way, regardless of development here, we're going to have some wind pushing some of these tropical downpours down in places like the Cayman Islands and Kingston, Jamaica, portions of the Yucatan, and portions of Central America. Still pretty fresh breeze. Uh-oh, I'm getting a phone call, but I'm not stopping. That's my fault. I'm not stopping this video. We're too far on. That's my fault for not having it on silent. It was spam, by the way. What else is new? So let's go into, again, the Northwest Caribbean, and then into, too far, Rusty, way too far, and then into, as we get into the Gulf of Mexico. So here you go. I'll get the right perspective. All right, it's about ready to finish that loop. And you notice that at the surface, it does try to, at the very end, wrap it up a little bit more. So we'll be watching that, okay? 9 days out, one model, informational purposes only. But we get the idea of what's going to be moving through that area. Now, the European model does show a chance of a tropical depression over the next 3 days. I want you to notice it's actually a little bit more focused off the south coast of Mexico. And notice that the development area is, how I mentioned, right over Central America. It's going to be a hard time trying to really spin stuff up over land and some of the higher terrain there. But it does show you that both the GFS and the NAM, the GFS and the European model are picking up on this wide twist in the atmosphere. This is the GFS model plots for Monday, okay? There's no reason we're too far out to really talk about this area yet, but just to show you, and I showed you this yesterday, that there is more of the ensemble members which are trying to bring in at least an area of low pressure, basically right over Belize. And again, it's a good scenario for that area because it's certainly going to bring in moisture-laden air. Then we'll see if something gets going in the Gulf of Mexico, we have to pay a little bit more attention to in a tropical nature. Now, on the eastern side of this is going to be the wetter weather, which is why I do expect, again, the Cayman Islands and Jamaica, and eventually the Bahamas to get onto the act as well. Okay, so let's go to the total rain just over the next 5 days, okay? Again, we won't get into anything more than that in the conjecture after that. But what are some of the broad takeaways? From the Dominican Republic east, we're starting to dry out. Again, the next couple of afternoons still could see some good rainfall over portions of Hispaniola. It's just going to get drier here. Doesn't mean we're going to be completely dry. But again, you guys probably want some showers to cool things off. Not a lot. Now, for Trinidad and Tobago, I have it far enough out where we get the next tropical wave coming in, but this is literally at the end of the forecast here on this total precipitation where we would start to actually see these rains come in. Today, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, in these areas, mainly dry. Starting Monday, we start to get more rain. You can see that swath of rain here on the GFS. Look how big that is. And now we're talking about the potential for some very heavy rain over portions of the Cayman Islands. Maybe up to a half foot of rain in some spots over the next 5 days. It's an area to monitor for potential flash flooding. For our friends in Jamaica, again, the GFS is a little bit drier compared to the NAM, but all areas with some heavier rain. I agree with the fact that the western part of the island, a little bit closer to the deeper moisture, places like Negril and Savannah Lamar might have a little bit better chance for heavier rain compared to places like Kingston and Portmore and Spanish Town. But everyone gets on the act, okay? You're not going to be dry over the next 5 days. hefty rainfall totals in portions of Nicaragua and Honduras. Look at these numbers. It's not bad. We don't want it too quickly, okay? But I don't think we're going to complain too much about this. Belize City, San Ignacio, Dangrija, Belmopan. We'll take it. 1 to 2 inches of rain, maybe isolated higher amounts. Orange Walk is a little bit more right now, okay? So again, GFS spreading this rain, and it does get as far north as Cancun and Cozumel. Not as much, but again, beyond the 5th day is when these areas get even more. For our friends in the Bahamas, Nassau South, heaviest rain for sure. Turks and Caicos, by the way, again, I don't know if I agree. I'm in the way, apologize. I don't know if I agree. You guys are kind of in this void in the GFS. I think the storms coming off of East Cuba are going to give you more rain than that. I would expect a few inches there overall. And again, we average these numbers, guys. We average these numbers. I'm going to show you the European model coming up. But up towards New Providence and Eleuthera and Andros, not bad. It gets drier for Abaco and Grand Bahama and Bimini in areas such as that. Okay, let me actually zoom out, show you the wide GFS. Notice that target area right over the Cayman Islands and then over portions of Central America. We take a look at the European model. Here you go. First of all, the European model is even wetter in the Pacific, but you see a lot of red on this map, guys, and you see that it's in pretty good agreement with the GFS. Drier Hispaniola to the east, except down towards Trinidad and Tobago when we start to get that rain coming back in with the next tropical wave. Huge swath of red. And again, red on this map is at least 75 millimeters of rain. So 3 inches of rain, 4 inches of rain, and some locally higher amounts. And places like Belize and Guatemala and Honduras are all in on that. Same thing for the Cayman Islands, same thing for portions of the Bahamas as well. A little bit drier in Jamaica, but still some decent downpours. So we're overall pretty wet here, guys, as we roll through the next 7 days on the European model. And the biggest thing is I line up these tracks of the heaviest rain, and it's the same thing as the GFS in general, right? One heavier swath in the open waters of the Northwest Caribbean, then through Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and then one right up the spine of Central America. And again, beyond this, we'll be monitoring for what happens if that spin can survive Central America into mid next week. All right, back over to our broad perspective, guys. So in the short term, heavier rains will continue for portions of the greater Antilles. We'll be monitoring, again, what's going to be moving up through in the deep moisture in Central America. And when it's not raining in your area, as you've mentioned, it is as hot as can be. Friends, you can find us across all of social media, and I appreciate when you do. We're on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook. Send me an email, miamimundo@gmail.com. You want to send me a picture or video of your area. I, of course, appreciate seeing those, and we'll pass those along. Thank you again for liking the video. If you haven't become a subscriber, click that subscribe button right now. Have a great rest of your Thursday, and I will see you tomorrow right here at Meteo Mundo.